Hey everyone! In 2009, the sun began unleashing unusually intense solar flares that disrupted its atmosphere. Dr. Helmsley, intrigued and alarmed by these phenomena, soon embarks on a journey to India to confer with the renowned astrophysicist Satnam. Their investigation leads them to a remote copper mine, where they ride an elevator deep underground, 11,000 feet beneath the surface. In the mine's laboratory, Satnam demonstrates that these flares are unprecedented in scale, even showing evidence that they are heating up the Earth's core by opening a tank of boiling groundwater. Alarmed by the looming threat of a global disaster, Helmsley hastily returns to the United States. Back home, Helmsley disrupts an important gala to brief Anheuser, the top official in the presidential administration, about the crisis. 6 months later, in 2010, President Wilson addresses the G8 summit to warn of an impending apocalypse. While this critical information is kept from the general public, the world's elite begin to make secret plans behind closed doors. In a secluded Tibetan valley, construction begins on enormous ark ships intended to save a select few, although the locals are told that a dam is being built instead. Entire communities are uprooted if deemed unfit to contribute, and only those with specialized skills are allowed to remain. By 2011, tickets for these arks are sold to the privileged at a staggering cost of €1 billion each. Meanwhile, in the Louvre, President Wilson's daughter Laura meets with the museum director to clandestinely swap the Mona Lisa with a counterfeit in order to protect the priceless masterpiece from extremist fanatics. In 2012, while the general public remains oblivious to the real crisis, television news begins to discuss the Mayan calendar and widespread apocalyptic predictions, even sparking the formation of self-destructing online groups. In California, mysterious fissures appear on the streets, dismissed by most as minor tremors. At a busy harbor, a cruise ship briefly sinks, sending shockwaves among its passengers. Later that evening, Laura receives an urgent call from the Louvre director. He confesses that the public was misled about the true reason behind relocating the art and announces he will soon reveal the full truth at a press conference. Before he can elaborate, his car suddenly explodes, taking his life. Meanwhile, in the White House, Helmsley and Anheuser deliver grave news to President Wilson. Their previous estimates were off, and the world's end is arriving much sooner than anticipated. Their briefing is abruptly interrupted by Laura, who demands to know why the organization she works for has been built on deception. With no alternative, Wilson is forced to reveal the grim reality. At the same time, Jackson embarks on a family trip to Yellowstone with his children. They are startled to see numerous helicopters overhead and find that the lake area has been cordoned off. Nevertheless, they ignore the warning signs and clamber over the barricade. Upon reaching the lake, the family is horrified to discover that the water has vanished and the shore is littered with dead animals. As a peculiar man named Charlie silently observes from the forest, military personnel arrive and escort the family to a nearby base. Later, Helmsley explains to Jackson that they are geologists examining the lake's strange instability and advises him to remove his children from the area immediately. After the family is safely relocated, Helmsley contacts Satnam, who reports that he had to seal off the mine and that similar alarming signals are being reported from other nations. The Earth's crust appears to be destabilizing, necessitating an immediate evacuation. Meanwhile, Jackson and his children settle into a camping site, only to be confronted by Charlie, who mocks them as he demands details about what the scientists have discovered. Enjoying the story so far? Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support powers our adventures. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive back into the adventure. That same evening, Jackson notices Charlie transmitting from his van. During his broadcast, Charlie speaks ominously about the coming apocalypse and even displays a quirky animation depicting the Mayan prophecy. When Jackson voices skepticism that such a monumental secret could remain hidden, Charlie warns that anyone who dares reveal the truth has already perished, a claim he supports by referencing several ominous newspaper clippings. Jackson recalls that a former professor of his died just 2 months prior, and that this professor had sent Charlie a mysterious map pinpointing the locations of secret government spaceships. Finding this notion preposterous, Jackson retreats to his tent. The next morning, the seismic activity in California intensifies, and a massive fissure splits a supermarket in two. Fortunately, no one is injured, but Jackson's ex-wife Kate urgently calls him, insisting that he return home with the children immediately. Simultaneously, Anheuser informs Wilson that only 4 arcs have been completed, far too few to save everyone. In a high-level meeting with world leaders, Helmsley presents a dire report stating that only 2 or 3 days remain before total collapse, prompting Wilson to announce the initiation of an evacuation plan. After dropping the kids off at Kate's, Jackson receives a call from his boss, a Russian oligarch named Karpov, who is covertly preparing for the evacuation. Karpov orders Jackson to bring his twin sons to the airport without delay. One of the boys ominously remarks that he is doomed, even as he escapes on a massive ship just moments before another minor quake shakes the region. Haunted by the possibility that Charlie's warnings may be true, Jackson rents a plane and rushes back to gather his family. At that moment, a more powerful earthquake rocks California, causing buildings to collapse. Jackson arrives just in time to collect his children, Kate, and her new boyfriend, Gordon. As the streets fracture and structures crumble around them, Jackson drives desperately to avoid plunging into gaping chasms. Chaos escalates as throngs of people attempt to flee, clogging the streets. Jackson is forced to navigate through front yards and around obstacles until his car finally surges off a makeshift platform. In downtown areas, collapsing bridges and crumbling skyscrapers claim thousands of lives. After a harrowing drive, the group finally reaches the airport, only to discover that their pilot has died. Gordon, who has taken a few rudimentary flying lessons, musters his courage and manages to get the family airborne just as the airport crumbles behind them. Soon, most of Los Angeles lies in ruins, and rising tides begin to swallow coastal cities. Moments later, the family halts at Yellowstone in search of Charlie and his elusive map. However, Charlie is nowhere to be found. He seems to be waiting atop a distant mountain for the final reckoning. Jackson drives the van all the way to the mountain, only to witness flocks of birds soaring by and hills slowly subsiding. While Jackson departs in the van, Charlie remains behind to continue his broadcast, even as a volcano erupts and obliterates the surrounding terrain. Volcanic debris begins to rain down, killing Charlie and striking the rear of the van. Fortunately, Jackson manages to leap over a widening fissure and reaches the airport just in time. Yet, he still needs to retrieve the map from the van, a process so prolonged that the ground continues to split and the van eventually collapses. Believing Jackson to be lost, Gordon readies the plane for takeoff. However, at the last second, Jackson emerges from the wreckage and dashes to grasp Kate's hand. Once safely aboard, the plane takes off and escapes the impending eruption. Jackson scrutinizes the map and realizes that their next destination is China, meaning they must secure a more capable aircraft. Later that evening, Anheuser and Helmsley watch grim news reports of natural disasters ravaging the globe. Iconic landmarks are being obliterated, millions are perishing, and hope seems to vanish from every corner of the earth. Helmsley believes it is time to divulge the truth to the public, but Anheuser insists that the revelation must wait until the select few have boarded the arcs, arguing that survival depends on it. Soon after, they notify President Wilson that evacuation is imminent, though Wilson, steadfast in his duty, chooses to remain behind with his people. Anheuser seizes control, silencing Helmsley's protests, and the plane departs with the elite and Laura, who receives a final farewell call from her father. In the aftermath, President Wilson finally makes a public announcement, revealing the catastrophic truth to the world. Meanwhile, Jackson's group arrives at the Las Vegas airport, where Russian oligarch Karpov is also waiting due to the cancellation of all other flights. Karpov has brought his twin sons, his girlfriend Tamara, and even her dog. Jackson pleads with Karpov to take his family as well, but Karpov initially dismisses him. However, when his pilot, Sasha, eventually locates a viable plane, Karpov admits he needs a co-pilot, an offer that Jackson's family readily provides in the form of Gordon. Karpov consents to transport everyone, and they hastily board a massive aircraft that is also carrying vehicles. Despite air traffic control's objections, Sasha and Gordon coordinate a daring takeoff, dodging collapsing buildings and barely skimming the top of a tower before heading toward China. Moments later, while flying over Hawaii, they are horrified to see the islands entirely engulfed in lava, with scarcely any structures remaining. In Tibet, a Buddhist monk named Nima receives a letter from his brother, who is involved with the Ark project and has revealed the truth. With his master's blessing, Nima descends from the mountain to collect his grandparents. Over in Washington, D.C., volcanic ash falls relentlessly, prompting President Wilson to open the White House as a refuge. When a little girl searches for her missing father, Wilson steps in to help, only for an earthquake to suddenly topple the Washington Monument. In the Vatican, a special mass gathers the faithful, but the ceremony is violently interrupted by an earthquake that reduces the building to rubble, claiming millions of lives. At that precise moment, news reports announce that tsunamis are forming across the globe. On a cruise ship in the open sea, massive waves capsize the vessel, leaving its crew powerless. Back in Washington, D.C., Wilson awakens amid ash and devastation, only to witness a tsunami sweep over the area, killing any survivors, including himself. Meanwhile, Helmsley learns that the base housing the Arks will soon be submerged, and that the Earth's crust has shifted dramatically. Both magnetic poles have reversed and shifted so drastically that the North Pole now lies in Wisconsin. Returning to Jackson's group, pilot Sasha announces that fuel is nearly exhausted, forcing an emergency landing. Once everyone is secured, Sasha and Gordon begin their descent, only to discover that the ocean has all but vanished. Due to continental drift, the plane finds itself in the Himalayas, remarkably close to the Ark construction site. Shortly thereafter, the plane loses engine power and begins flying perilously low, causing violent turbulence. With landing conditions nearly impossible, Sasha instructs everyone to exit via the cargo hold. Initially, Gordon assists, but the pilot directs him to join the others. The families disembark together in a vehicle that lands safely on the snow, while the remaining vehicles launch and crash. Sasha manages to land the plane, but it soon skids on icy terrain and tumbles off a cliff, exploding on impact and claiming his life. At that moment, Chinese cargo helicopters sweep in, transporting animals to the Arks. Some military officers spot the stranded families and attempt a rescue, though they only accept those with valid tickets. Karpov departs with his children and the dog, deliberately leaving behind Tamara, who, it turns out, betrayed him with Sasha, much to his secret relief. The group wanders until they see a truck, and Jackson hurls a rock to stop it. The truck's driver is revealed to be Nima, who agrees to pick them up. Meanwhile, Helmsley's team arrives in the area and observes numerous high-profile figures, including the Queen accompanied by her dogs. Only 4 Arks are completed, and one of them was damaged by the earthquakes, leaving many people, including Karpov, unable to board. Helmsley and Laura are appalled to discover that many influential scientists are actually wealthy individuals without practical skills, while not a single competent Ark worker has secured a ticket. Entering his private cabin, Helmsley notes that it could easily accommodate 10 people, yet it's reserved exclusively for luxury. At that moment, he receives a call from Satnam, who reveals that no plane came for him as promised, and that a tsunami is now barreling toward his town. Satnam utters a final farewell before perishing with his family. In a state of panic, Helmsley reviews new data and learns they have only 30 minutes before the wave strikes the Arks. Outside the base, Nima arrives with his group, but his brother Tenzin initially refuses to accept anyone beyond his immediate family. Kate pleads with him to at least take the children, but Tenzin's grandmother scolds him, eventually persuading him to bring everyone along. As the Arks prepare to depart, it becomes clear that the damaged ship cannot be fully repaired, meaning that some passengers will be left behind. A furious Karpov punches a guard to force his way through, and the crowd surges toward the nearest Ark. However, the ship begins to drift away from the platform, prompting some people to attempt jumping aboard. As several individuals tragically fall to their deaths, Tenzin leads his group via an alternate safe route. Meanwhile, Tamara notices that her dog is with Karpov's children and calls out to reclaim it. The dog quickly traverses a narrow connector and reaches its owner just as the gates close. Tamara then bids Karpov farewell with a defiant middle finger. As Tenzin opens a secret passage inside the Ark for the group, Helmsley watches in dismay as people plummet from the platform. Overwhelmed, he contacts world leaders, urging them to open the gates so more people can board. Anheuser interrupts, warning that there are only 15 minutes remaining before the tsunami hits. Undeterred, Helmsley argues that they are losing their humanity, citing Satnam's fate, and when Laura adds that President Wilson would have opened the gates, the global leaders finally relent and grant permission. Inside the Ark, Jackson's group finds themselves in peril as they maneuver around shifting lifting mechanisms. Tenzin and Gordon are jostled off the edge and barely cling to safety, though the spinning gears injure Tenzin's leg. Jackson rushes to assist, managing to pull Tenzin back up, but Gordon slips and is tragically crushed by the machinery. Jackson narrowly escapes being crushed himself when the cable they were holding onto becomes entangled and jams the mechanism. Although the gate doesn't fully open, it creates just enough room for the panicked crowd to board. With only 4 minutes remaining before impact, the tsunami surges closer, swallowing the mountains, as Nima's master rings the temple bell one last time before dying. As the gates begin to close, Karpov remains stranded outside. In a desperate final act, he throws his children into the Ark just before he falls to his death. Due to the jammed cable, the gate fails to close completely, delaying the Ark's departure. Technicians monitor the situation via cameras and locate Jackson's group, prompting Helmsley to rush to resolve the issue. At that moment, the tsunami strikes the Arks, claiming the lives of all remaining base workers. Water rushes into Helmsley's Ark through an open door, and as panic spreads, the security system begins sealing compartments one by one. The chamber containing Jackson's group is quickly isolated, dividing them and leaving the space flooded. To compound matters, the massive wave hurls a plane into the Ark, dislodging supports and causing collisions with nearby vessels. The engine must be activated to move the Ark away, but an open gate makes this impossible. The relentless force of the tsunami causes the Ark to shake violently, propelling it toward Mount Everest. A catastrophic collision seems imminent. Helmsley enters the flooded chamber and finds Jackson's daughter along with the family dog. He then contacts the rest of the group through a wall-mounted communication system. He explains how to unlock the lift mechanism and warns of its dangers. But Jackson, accepting the risk, dives in. As Kate is momentarily distracted while tending to Tenzin's injury, her son defies his father's orders and helps Jackson by holding a flashlight so he can work with both hands. After a strenuous struggle, Jackson finally pulls out the jammed cable just as the Ark's bottom collides with a rocky outcrop. The gate finally shuts, allowing technicians to start the engine, but the Ark is moving too rapidly to reverse course. The Ark collides with the mountain and enormous boulders tumble down, shattering several windows. Fortunately, a reverse mechanism activates in time to prevent further damage, and the Ark manages to pull away from the mountain. Amid cheers and relief, Jackson is reunited with his family. In the aftermath, time is marked as after the flood. On the 27th day of the first month, Helmsley and Laura share their first tender kiss. At that moment, the captain announces that the skies have cleared, and people finally step outside to witness the sunlight again. As the inhabitants of all 3 Arks enjoy the fresh air, Helmsley checks satellite data and learns that the floodwaters are receding and the entire African continent has risen. The Arks immediately set a course for Africa, ready to begin a new chapter in life. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our other videos. See you next time.